I speak at conference every year, and to be frank, this is the first time, and this is my fault, this is the first time I've realised that the union publishes a verbatim record of everything that's said. Could someone cut out the bad language that I'm about to use? Because when we come onto the Tories record, I might be effing and blinding a bit. So if you could help me, that would be really wonderful. I couldn't make it last year. I'm really sorry, as Ian said. I wasn't well, and Dave Crosby stood in for me. I don't know whether you knew the story of what happened to me last year. There's a moral tale behind all this. I was speaking in Trafalgar Square on May Day and thought I had a fair amount of indigestion, and so I just put it off, and then spoke at about a dozen meetings between then and the Saturday. And on the Saturday, I was speaking at a conference on disabilities, our anti-cuts campaign that we support as a union. And then I was driving Tony Benn and myself down to speak at a meeting in Brighton. And at the conference in central London on the Saturday, I was sitting next to Ian Hodson. I went up and spoke, came off, shook Ian's hand, and immediately had a heart attack. Now, I don't blame anyone for this. But the moral behind this tale, basically, is always have a paramedic when you're with him, every time. But the reason I'm here this year is because of the care and the professional treatment of the NHS. And I'm never surprised and always staggered at the commitment and devotion of NHS staff. And yet that bastard, Jeremy Hunt, this year has denied them their pay increase. Even a 1% pay increase, Jeremy Hunt has refused them this year. And that's why on July the 10th, a large number of public sector workers will be coming out on strike, about 1.5 million workers coming out, the largest industrial action we've seen in this country for a number of years. Because when that nurse, that doctor, that health worker, the midwives and all the others going to work this year, their pay is not being increased, it's actually being cut. I'm just one of the millions of reasons why we've got to prevent this government attacking our health workers and privatising our NHS. And that's why us as a union will always be in solidarity with the campaigns against the privatisation of the NHS and what this coalition government is doing. We set up as you know, we set up the Parliamentary group 6 years ago now. We've got about 27 members. And we set it up because we wanted a voice in Parliament, a political voice to represent us as a union. That voice couldn't be heard if it wasn't for the support, first of all, of the national officers, Ronnie and Ian, and the executive, and all the other officers of the union. And I'd like to thank them for the support that they give us. But in addition to that, we have a small team that works with us, with Simeon Andrews coordinates, Richard, Laurie and Michael, and I'd like to thank them on your behalf for the work that they do. They deserve our applause for their commitment. You as a union, rank and file members coming together in the branches, coming onto this conference, then the executive meets, you set our agenda. You determine what we say in Parliament, the issues that we take up. And it's based upon what our members want. What do our members want? They want a secure job. They want decent pay. And they want to work in a safe and healthy environment. They don't want to have to put their lives at risk when they go to work. So that's our agenda. And it's not much to ask for in the 6th richest country in the world, is it? Not much. Secure job, decent pay, and not put your life at risk when you go to work. And that's what we've been backing the union up. On the secure jobs, we've done everything we possibly can to expose what's happening within our industry. As you know better than me, we've now got a new breed of employer. The two sisters are the best example of the new employer vulture capitalists that are taking over our industry in this country. The way in which they've exploited every opportunity. We saw it at Brooks in Leicester. Then we saw it in Corby, and then we saw it in Newport. These are asset strippers. And they strip the assets from our workers. They take their jobs, and if they continue to employ them, they try to cut their wages and undermine their conditions. They're vandals and vultures. And we try to expose that as much as we can in Parliament. Now, there's some jobs that you give us, to be honest, which are not the most enjoyable. And one of them is in a few weeks' time, we're meeting Ranjit Singh Boparan from Two Sisters, and we're going to talk to him about the way he's treated our members. And for Frank, we're going to say to him this: if you continue on like this, every opportunity we get in Parliament, we will name and shame you on every occasion. Our members need a secure job. They need secure employment. And that means employers that will work with us rather than against us, end the asset stripping and ending the cutting. They also need decent pay. There's too many in our industry now that are on low pay. And that's why I think it was important that in Parliament we did everything we possibly could to support the Hovis strikers, our members. And I just want to say thank you to them. Not just thank you for what they did for our union, but thank you for what they did to the whole of the trade union movement in this country. They sent fighting off an employer who tried to bring in a two-tier workforce, impose zero-hours contracts on some. They sent a message of confidence right the way across our trade union movement. And I know what courage and determination that took. But I tell you, it lifted the spirits of so many. There'll be other trade union members in other trade unions at the moment who are fighting back on the basis of the example set by our members at Hovis. They're heroes and heroines, every one of them. I want to thank this union as well. This union has supported and virtually launched, to be frank, the Fast Food Rights Campaign. These are some of the most exploited workers in this country, in fact, around the world. They work in the fast food sector, largely young people, some of them with their first jobs. They work on zero-hours contracts and low pay and intimidation. We held a meeting, Ian was there. One of the workers in one of these fast food joints came up and said, "I've got no work next week." Why is that? I didn't smile at customers enough today. So to penalise him and send a message to others, no work the following week because he's on a zero-hours contract. That's the level of intimidation that's going on. Someone somewhere had to stand up for these workers, and I'm proud it was you. I'm proud it was the Bakers Union that did it. We took up the challenge, and we've linked up, thanks to Ronnie and Ian's leadership, we've linked up now with the global campaign. And the other day we had a day of action, but that day of action wasn't just a number of us in this country on picket lines outside McDonnell's. It started in Japan, and as the sun went round the globe, there were picket lines on McDonnell's shops right the way across the world, right the way from Japan back over to the United States. And we were part of that international solidarity. So be proud of what you're doing for this most vulnerable group of workers. It's in the best traditions of the trade union movement. Nobody should stand by when brothers and sisters are being damaged, made vulnerable and exploited in this way. We've come to their aid. It's in the best tradition of our movement. That principle, that an injury to one is an injury to all of us. Thank you for what you're doing. I just want to say thank you. On safety, again, people want decent, secure employment, decent pay, but they want to be safe when they go to work. So we've focused on the two issues that you set us over this last couple of years. The first, as you know, is asthma. We've tried to expose in Parliament and elsewhere in our negotiations with ministers and with the Labour front bench just what a curse asthma is to our members. We're the second group of workers in the country with the highest levels of asthma, Baker's asthma. We've been working with Professor Paul Callanan, who I think actually is superb. He's been fantastic support. With the Brompton Hospital Imperial, we've been working with them. We met his boss, the chief exec, who gave us total support in the research that he's undertaken. And we've had a breakthrough this year. Thanks to Paul's work and our pressure, the HSE now, yes, it's been cut to ribbons, but now they've made Baker's asthma a priority in this coming period. So that's a major success for us, because what we want is not just to ensure that our members we expose what's going on, but we want to make sure that we introduce safe practices so never again will our members endure the curse of that condition. The second priority you gave us was maximum temperatures. And we've been trying to expose more and more in our debates in Parliament and in our meetings with ministers and others just what these short-term and long-term implications are for our members working in hot conditions. And I think we're winning the argument. We almost got there to set a maximum temperature under the last government. But the employers and the civil servants threw every hurdle in the last government's way. So what we're doing now is we're getting no joy from this government, but we're trying to get a commitment from the Labour Party to insert it in the manifesto. As we reported last year, we met Ed Miliband, we've met the front bench, Steve Timms again, and we feel that we've at least now won the argument. It's trying to ensure in this coming 6 months it's inserted into the manifesto. And I have to say this, the TUC has supported us 100%, and they've sent their experts down in our negotiations, and we've received support right the way across the union movement. So that's our agenda, and that's the work we've been doing, and people have been working very hard. And I want to say how proud I am that I can stand up in Parliament with the backing of yourselves, with the backing of this union, and speak authoritatively on what's happening within our sector, and that we're gaining some ground as well. It is about secure jobs, decent pay, and a safe working environment. But you know, our members aren't just interested about what happens to them at work, they're interested in what happens when they go home, what's happening to their families. We've got 12 months left of this government. And what this government is doing is a scorched earth policy. There's a number of them who think they may not get back next time, so they're trying to drive through their policies as rapidly as they possibly can over the next 12 months. And what does it mean? It means cuts and privatisation. The privatisation of the health service is going on apace at the moment. They're trying to drive it through as fast as they possibly can. They're trying to cut back on all public expenditure. But they're targeting particular groups. And one of the groups they're targeting is anyone who claims any welfare benefit whatsoever. And the special group they've targeted, and this is why this union has been so strong in supporting their campaigns, is people with disabilities. They introduced the work capability test, administered by a private company called Atos, that was making millions out of the contract. And what they were there for is to assess every person with disability whether they could work or not. Well, it wasn't about that. They were trying to force as many people off benefits as possible. They assessed over 1,300 people as fit for work who died before they even took up work. There's a website called Callum's List. It lists the number of people who have gone through the WCA, the capability assessment under Atos, and committed suicide. The one for me was Paul Reiki up in Scotland. He's a poet. Went through the work capability assessment test. He didn't leave a suicide note. He just left beside him the 2 letters that they sent him, withdrawing all his benefits. We had another case in Cameron's own constituency. A man who lost all his benefits. He starved to death in Cameron's own constituency. 5 stone 8 pounds he was when they found him. And when they did the coroner's report, his own doctor said up until then he was coping perfectly well. But this pushed him over the edge. We asked the minister, on our group, we asked Ian Duncan Smith to publish the number of people where the coroner had reported that the loss of benefits had been a contributory factor to their suicide. They started collecting the information and now they've stopped and they refuse to publish it. Why? Because it exposes the brutality of this government and what they're doing. And it just goes on. And at the same time, they try to tell us there's a recovery. Not for our people. Do you feel better off? None of us do. No working class person in this country feels better off with this supposed recovery. Why? Because the latest statistics demonstrate that 95% of the benefits of any recovery of the last 18 months has gone to the top 1%. So the bankers and speculators who caused the crisis are now making money out of the crisis. That's the scandal that we're having to deal with. And I think the government took a very conscious decision that this next 12 months is that they'll destroy everything they possibly can that we as a movement built up over generations. So they are coming back for us. There's going to be more legislation in the Queen's speech we saw to attack rights at employment tribunals. They're storing up the opportunity maybe to bring back more legislation around the balloting for trade unions to prevent them taking industrial action. Well, what's our response going to be? We've got to, in Parliament, do all we can to frustrate them, delay them and prevent them implementing the legislation. But in addition to that, to be frank, outside of Parliament, we've got to do everything we possibly can as well. We've got to fight back. So when the demonstrations are called, People's Assembly on June the 21st, we should attend, we should be there and be proud to be there. When the industrial action takes place, that other unions are taking place, let's do everything we possibly can to support them. Even if we're not involved in that industrial action, let's join them on their picket lines, let's join them at their rallies and give them all the support we possibly can. Because we've got to bring this government down as soon as we possibly can. I don't think we can wait 12 months. I'll just say two things finally as well. In every recession in our history, there's always been some right-wing, proto-fascist politician who's come along to exploit that recession. In the 1930s, it was Mosley blaming the Jews. In the 1980s, it was the BNP and the National Front blaming blacks and Asians. Well, this time round, we've got Nigel Farage blaming any immigrant whatsoever coming from any country. And when he says, "I'm not racist," oh, yes, he is. Yes, he is. And he exposed himself when he said a few weeks ago about Romanians living next to him. He exposed that he is a racist. We had a discussion as a family and took the view if Nigel Farage moves in next door, we're moving out, honestly. And you know, when the message got lost in translation in the way back to Bulgaria and Romania, and some poor sods thought when they came to this country they'd be forced to live next to Nigel Farage. There was a near riot at the airport. We've got to ensure that our members are not deceived by this scapegoating of individuals. It's just a disguise, a cover-up from the ones who really caused the crisis, which is the bankers and the speculators, supported by those who failed to regulate them in government. And that was the Tories, but I have to say that was elements in neoliberal New Labour as well. And that leads me to this final point. I want a Labour government. I want a Labour government. But we're not going to get a Labour government until someone stands up and says this is what a Labour government does. And this is what a Labour government should do. It should build council homes to make sure people have got a roof over their heads. It should secure full employment. It shouldn't implement a minimum wage, it should implement a living wage. It should restore trade union rights. It should end all privatisation of the NHS. And yes, let's start bringing them back, starting with rail and then going on to energy. Bring them back into public ownership and control. And I just say finally this, because Tony Blair is hovering about again. We should also say as a Labour government we're a party of peace and always have been, and we'll never ever go down the road of invading another country like Iraq again. I think if a Labour leader came out with those policies, we'd be re-elected. But there's a lack of confidence in the Labour leadership. So what we've got to do is give them confidence. Ed Miliband has demonstrated that when an issue is safe, he'll move on to that ground. And when he does, he gains popularity. So when it was safe to attack Murdoch, he did. When it was safe to attack bankers' bonuses, he did. When it was safe to attack the energy companies and call for freezers, he did. And it rose in the opinion polls. So what our job is to recognise we've got to make an issue safe. We've got to campaign on these issues, make them safe, and Labour leadership will move. It's a reversal of leadership. We've got to become the leaders now to lead the leader. Because in that way, we can develop a policy programme that I think can return a Labour government, get rid of this stinking vandalising coalition, and replace it with a Labour government that you never know. We might be able to talk about socialism again. I just think it needs three things. It needs three things. I repeat it. Determination. Let's be determined we're going to do this. Courage. Stand up. Even if things are unpopular in the first instance, stand up and have courage. But above all else, It needs solidarity, working in solidarity together, helping each other, striving together, supporting one another. It's the basis of our movement. Solidarity. Solidarity, comrades.